It's not. I mean, clearly Stark and Lannister, York and Lancaster. I mean, there are all of these. How much was it drawn from the Wars of the Roses? How much was that sort of just convenient material for you to suck into this world?
Well, there was certainly an inspiration, and probably the Wars of the Roses are the single greatest historical inspiration. But I read a lot of popular history. I also read, the history of the Crusades and the Albigensian Crusade and the Hundred Years' War, and of course a lot of Nigel Tranter books about the historical fiction about the history of Scotland, which always end badly. The history of Scotland is singularly bloody. If you think Game of Thrones is violent, read some Scottish history.
You drew on Scottish history for the Red Wedding, of course.
Yes. The Red Wedding was loosely based on the Black Dinner, as they called it. But of course, once again, I turned it up to 11. And then David and Dan got hold of it for a TV show and turned it up to 14. You can always turn it up a little more.
We've got
the Black Dinner, though, is an interesting case. I mean, I say I love history, but I always want to make it clear that I'm not a professional historian. And the histories that I read and the histories that I love are, I guess, what are called popular histories. They're not academic histories. If you accidentally stumble on an academic history, it'll probably put you to sleep very quickly, the stuff that the professional historians do. Now, the Black Dinner of Scotland, I don't know how many of you know that, was there was a enmity between the Earl of Douglas, the Black Douglas as he was called, and the King of Scotland. So he invited the Earl of Douglas, gave him a safe passage to come to the castle and discuss it. And they had a lovely dinner. The Earl, who was young, he was only like 18, 19 years old, and he brought his even younger brother, who was like 15 years old, with him. And they had a lovely dinner with the King of Scotland. And then at the end of it, they started playing this very sonorous beat, and some servants entered with a covered platter, underneath which was a black boar's head, which was the symbol of death. And so then they took the Earl and his little 14, 15-year-old brother out, and they beheaded both of them in the yard. It's a great story, and I went from that and I constructed the Red Wedding. Of course, that's the story in myth and in popular legend, but then if you read an academic historian, said none of that ever happened. No, they did execute the Earl and all that, but there was no sonorous beat, there was no black boar's head. All of that stuff was invented later. And maybe it was, but whoever invented it was a pretty good storyteller, because I like the popular version of it much better than I like the boring academic version of it. I think sometimes in the study of history there must be someone